Alrighty, everyone. This is meteorologist Timmy Albertson here with you guys again for another quick little update on Hurricane Idalia. Hurricane Idalia is working her way towards the Apalachee Bay area of the Florida Big Bend, so it'll be making landfall sometime early tomorrow morning, probably as a Category 3 hurricane. Interesting historical note: there has never been a Category 3 or greater hurricane that has ever made landfall in Apalachee Bay area, at least in recorded history. So nonetheless, though, Category 3 hurricanes is not unusual overall for the state of Florida, but will be interesting to see how the impacts kind of shape out for some of these locations that, again, as mentioned, have never had a recorded major hurricane, at least in that particular area. So that'll be kind of interesting to see. All right, 105-mile-an-hour sustained winds right now, still a Category 2, but it'll probably intensify a little bit overnight tonight. If we flip over to the radar here, there it is on the Tampa Bay radar. You can see that eye swirling there right across the center there of your screen. Obviously, we have the outer band storms that are beginning to work their way into the Tampa Bay area, as well as other parts along the western Florida coast. What's interesting, it might be a little hard to see, but there is actually a tornado watch that is in effect for parts of western Florida. This is not unusual for tropical systems, especially stronger ones when they do make landfall. There's a lot of wind shear going on, especially around those outer bands, which tend to be a little, which tend to be uh, experiencing a lot of wind shear, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And, so it's not unusual to actually get tornadoes to be produced within some of those little storms there. And there have been at times some radar returns suggesting maybe a few water spouts out in the open water. But for the most part, right now, things have been pretty quiet for most of mainland Florida. But that could change as we go through the overnight hours. And again, keep an eye on that tornado probability, especially across the western half of the state. So again, sometimes you get these little trails that just kind of develop from these systems. With that in mind, the eye of Idalia is located here. If we kind of zoom in a little bit, that's not the eye. There's the eye. And that nice little swirl there, you can see the eye wall of it right there. This is where the strongest winds are going to be located. If we go ahead and stop the radar imagery here, again, we can see the eye wall right about here. It's what surrounds the eye, and this is where the strongest winds are going to be. And that is the case with just about with every hurricane, actually, is the strongest winds are located right around here. And actually, the hurricane force winds only extend not too far out from the center, only to about right here. So while we're talking about 105-mile-an-hour winds with the hurricane, well, again, they're only kind of located in the small portion. Nonetheless, the tropical storm force wind field does expand pretty far out. And so it's certainly going to be a breezy one in the Tampa Bay area overnight tonight, as well as other places along the western Florida coast. Idalia is likely going to be making landfall late tonight, early tomorrow morning as a Category 3 hurricane of winds of around 120 or so miles an hour. And it'll be doing so right here in the center of Apalachee Bay. And again, as mentioned, interestingly, in historical records, there has never been a major hurricane, which is a Category 3 or higher, to have made landfall in the Apalachee Bay area. Now, obviously, Florida has seen its fair share of very strong hurricanes. It's just kind of interesting there that atmospheric conditions coincidentally had played a part in never having a little major hurricane making landfall in that particular area. Sounded pretty interesting to see exactly how the effects shape out. But overall, again, it's Florida. They're used to hurricanes there, and the big thing is going to be the storm surge with it. About 10 to 15-foot storm surge, which is basically the winds pushing the water inland. Again, it's not going to flood the entire state, but it certainly does so along the immediate coastal areas. Inundates them there with some good flooding, and that combined with the winds certainly leads to, more or less some damage that is going to be likely across those areas. Otherwise, it is a muggy one right now in Florida with temperatures in the upper 70s and dew points sitting well into the mid to even upper 70s too. So the thing that people sometimes kind of forget about these hurricanes is that, when they do blow in, the temperatures don't really drop with them. It stays pretty warm out there, and it also stays very, very muggy. So once the hurricane passes through, you're often left with a very hot and muggy mess that just kind of adds to the storm itself. So again, this is the wind field down here of Tropical Storm Idalia. You can see it's running a little bit behind. This was as of about 2 hours ago, and obviously Idalia has moved further to the north since then. But you can see here that the hurricane force winds only extend about, let's see here, 20 or so miles out from the center. So again, with these hurricanes, especially when they're intensifying, they kind of get a little bit compact. And so you can see the hurricane force winds not really extending too far out from the center. But now as Idalia gets a little bit stronger, obviously the wind field will probably expand a little bit there, but you get the idea. Strong tropical storm force winds 57 to 73 miles an hour extend further out from the center. As a matter of fact, if we were to go ahead and kind of put a line on that there, about 45 miles out from the center of Idalia. Now, again, that was a little bit ago, but Idalia is expected to intensify a little bit more here. So if we were to kind of line this up with our eyes here, about 45 miles out from the center is where those strong tropical storm force winds above 50 some miles an hour extend. Pretty good distance. That's kind of what the radius is at this point. Winds about 57 miles an hour or greater. So again, that is going to be about this far out from the center. So that circle there is where those winds are probably at right now. So again, still offshore, but we do see that at least some tropical storm force winds are already making their way on land. And for those of you who might not be familiar with the way that we talk about, tropical storm and hurricanes and everything, this is the Saffir-Simpson scale here. This is what we use in the Atlantic, the East Pacific, and the Central Pacific to rate tropical systems. We just need to find one spot of it that has 1 minute sustained wind values, and that's how it gets rated. So again, the whole thing does not have 105-mile-an-hour winds. It's rather just kind of right around that eye wall there. But again, that is enough to get it its Category 2 rating at this time. And as mentioned, it'll likely become a Category 3 hurricane later on tonight, with winds maybe around 115 or 120 miles an hour. That puts it in the Category 3 range. But again, that's just going to be kind of that around the eye wall of the hurricane is where that's going to be. So again, the whole thing doesn't need to have that. Regardless, this is kind of the system that we use. Tropical depression is the weakest. Tropical storm is next. 39 to 73 mile an hour winds. Once it becomes a tropical storm, that's when it gets its name. And then 74 miles an hour and above is hurricane. Hurricanes are divided into 5 categories. Folks, I know this might sound a bit confusing to some, but really it's pretty simple. Anything above 74 miles an hour is a hurricane. And then just because of meteorology, we like to classify things. There's 5 categories of hurricane. Category 5 is the strongest, with winds greater than or equal to 157 miles an hour. Years ago, it used to actually be 155 miles an hour, but they changed it, a few years back ago. But again, 157 mile an hour winds is what is needed for a Category 5 hurricane. Now, we're not expecting Idalia to do that at all, but again, we are expecting it to be a Category 3 hurricane, again, around 115, maybe 120 mile an hour sustained winds in the eye wall. Again, storm surge up along parts of Apalachee Bay are going to be around 10 to 15 feet. Certainly going to cause quite a bit of inundation, especially right up along the coastline. If you've ever been to the Gulf Coast, it's very low elevation. The elevation does not rise much, over the course of Florida. So again, that water, it will go a little ways in, but it's not going to go all the way to Gainesville. But you get the idea. Now, as far as the winds are concerned with Idalia, well, Idalia is going to weaken as she does make landfall. The thing is, though, is that she's going to be moving at a pretty decent speed. So we might not see her weaken quite as rapidly as we would with maybe a slower moving system, because again, when it moves fast, it's covering, more area in a less amount of time. Tropical systems do not like land. That weakens them. They require ocean, but if it's moving fast enough, it'll at least maintain its intensity further a little bit inland there. And as a matter of fact, by the time we get towards early tomorrow afternoon, Idalia, albeit weakened, will still probably be a hurricane with winds of around 85 miles an hour as it goes into parts of southern Georgia. So because of that, if we were to flip on the warnings, we do see that there are, whoop, that's the wrong one. If we do flip on the warnings, we do see that there are actually hurricane warnings that go into parts of Georgia in the southern part there. We'll go ahead and flip all these on, make sure we got all of our warnings here. And we're going to go ahead and take off the track. Now, remind you guys that the cone that you see here is just where the center is going to be. Obviously, the effects of this will extend beyond the center, as we just took a look at with the wind map there. So let's go ahead here and flip off that and just take a look here quickly at the warnings. Again, the red color are the hurricane warnings. So again, even though the strongest of winds will be making landfall kind of in a narrow area, the wind field will still be expanded a little bit, and it'll shrink as it goes inland as it weakens. But again, could maybe see at least hurricane force wind gusts all the way into parts of southern Georgia as we go into the day tomorrow. So right now, the expected landfall is going to be sometime probably early tomorrow morning. At about 2 a.m., it's going to be located right around this buoy, almost taking a direct hit. Winds right now at that buoy are about 40-mile-an-hour wind gusts. Sustained winds, though, about 30 miles an hour, and waves are actually about 10 feet over there. And as mentioned, this will probably be taking a very close to a direct hit, but it'll be doing so. Obviously, it's dark out there now, so this is an old picture from about possibly an hour and a half ago. But the observations are actually are from about 9 o'clock. I believe that is going, yeah, 9 o'clock Eastern time, I believe. So you get the idea there. Conditions certainly going to be kind of I guess deteriorating for those of you who don't like hurricanes, or getting better for those of you who do like hurricanes. But it's going to get very windy there, very wavy. It'll be very interesting to see what those reports are. Obviously, there are going to be some video that we'll be seeing from up along the coastline as we go into the early morning hours. We do have, it looks like, a few spotters that are going to be out there, and certainly some webcams. And, well, you get the idea. We'll have a pretty good visual of this hurricane as it does make its way inland. And obviously, we'll get the reports here and there. So a little bit of a tornado threat across western Florida as we go through the overnight tonight. That's not unusual with these stronger tropical systems. A lot of wind shear going on, a lot of components. So it's not unusual to see at least generally weak tornadoes to be produced. But again, sometimes they can be a little bit more on the moderate side. You tend not to see the big F5s with hurricanes, but you will see, obviously some strong tornadoes here and there, again, under certain circumstances. So there is going to be a little bit of probability for some tornadoes, at least overnight tonight, and even going into the day tomorrow. Beyond that, Idalia will emerge out off the Carolina coast sometime probably tomorrow night. It'll be around Charleston tomorrow night, and then it'll be out in the open waters. And from what it will do there, still a little uncertain at this time. Certainly will be something to kind of keep an eye on to see if it maybe wants to loop around or just stay out in the open waters. That is for a different topic, different day. But again, for right now, looks pretty likely, pretty certain that it's going to be making a landfall in Apalachee Bay late tonight. Well, probably more so early tomorrow morning. We will have some updates for you there as well. Quick side thing here for those of you who remember me talking about the velocity radar imagery we use to look for when we're talking about rotation within a thunderstorm, or even tornadoes and strong winds. The other thing about velocity radar imagery is you can get a pretty good idea of the hurricane wind speeds a little bit, albeit given that we're pretty far out from the radar center, we're looking a little higher up into the storm. But we're going to go ahead here and just take a look at the velocity imagery really quickly here with Idalia. And let's go ahead and see kind of what the radar is, at least a few thousand feet up, kind of picking up on some of the wind speeds here. And this could give us a good indication of where we might end up with our next update that comes out at about 10 o'clock, 10 o'clock Central Time, or 11 p.m. Eastern Time. So we're recording this at around 9:45, so still a little ways to go before we get that. So we've got a wind measurement here, at least according to radar, about 109 miles an hour. Here's another 109. There's a little pocket of 118 mile an hour winds down here. So again, if we've assumed that this is about a couple thousand feet above ground level, we're also kind of in a frictionless area. So, but if we filter it down, subtract about maybe 5 to 10 miles an hour or so, that puts it right around 115 mile an hour. So certainly category 3 status And according, at least if we just want to go based solely off the radar imagery at this time on the southern portion of the hurricane, again, looks to be about probably 110 to 115 mile an hour winds right around here. We'll see what the hurricane hunters that are flying into this system. Obviously, we'll see what they say, and we'll see what the Hurricane Center puts out. But again, that's just using the radar imagery. So as Idalia gets closer to land, this will come in handy, very much so, for kind of getting a very good indication of what the winds are going to be around that area. Right now, we're using the Tampa Bay radar. It looks like we'll probably have to switch maybe over to Tallahassee's radar as Idalia does get closer towards land. But right now, this is the closest radar to it. And again, coming across very nicely. On a side note, because it's on the because the Tampa radar is looking pretty far out. We're not seeing quite as much being detected over here, and part of that just maybe because of the distance away from the radar site, but there is most likely some rain here. So there's your eye wall right there. That's the strongest winds. This is also probably another good burst of some pretty good winds there too, but not quite as strong as probably what's up right around here. So this will be what we'll be tracking as we head our way through the overnight tonight, but this will probably be the last update that we're going to do on Idalia this evening. However, again, as mentioned, I'll be back tomorrow morning. We'll take more of a look at Idalia there, especially as she gets closer to land. Should be a very interesting one. And like I said, I hate to throw out the term record breaking, as that can easily get misconstrued. Idalia itself is not a record breaking hurricane in its structure, but because it could be making a landfall in an area that just ironically, for as many times as Florida has been hit, there has never been, at least on record that we know of, a Category 3 or higher hurricane that made landfall in Apalachee Bay, the center of it. Now, we've had hurricanes that have been around that area, obviously, and we've had major hurricanes that have skirted past it. But interestingly, there's not been one on record that the center of it has made landfall in Apalachee Bay. So it will be very interesting to see, how our forecasting models kind of handle this particular area. But again, as mentioned, Idalia itself, like I said, is not going to be a record-breaking hurricane in of itself, but what it could do in parts of the Apalachee Bay area could maybe be record-setting just based on that geographical area there. Now, obviously, if this were to hit Miami or something, it'd probably be a little bit of a different story, but maybe not quite as record-breaking. They've had some pretty strong ones down there before. But so just kind of keep that in mind if you do hear, it will be kind of a first seeing a major hurricane, which is a Category 3 or above, making landfall there. But again, Idalia itself, wouldn't necessarily be considered record breaking if that makes any sense. But again, still something to keep interesting. Certainly going to be bringing in some very big impacts there. We talk about the Category 3 hurricanes and above. I mean, they bring in some good winds and they bring in some storm surge, and there will be damage, certainly. But it'll be interesting. I think from a scientific standpoint. I think it'll be very interesting to see the results of this and to see how some of our forecasting models have held up, just based on the fact that we've never had one that strong. But then again, it's always interesting to see how the models and everything hold up with any hurricane. So with that in mind, everyone, that is just kind of a quick update on Idalia. Again, there'll be another advisory coming out probably in about an hour or so. We'll come back to this as we go into tomorrow morning. Like I said, probably right around the landfall time. Again, that buoy is going to take a direct hit as we go into the overnight tonight. So, or a near direct hit. We'll see here, unless Idalia decides it wants to wiggle a little bit more to the east, which it may try to do slightly. But again, we saw how narrow that wind field is. So, I mean, keep in mind here that if it wiggles, 10 miles or so further to the east, it could, make an impact on some of the wind measurements that could be spotted from that. I'm just talking science at this point. You guys, you get what I'm saying, though. So we'll have some interesting observations to take a look at in the morning, and so tomorrow should be a pretty fun one. So make sure you tune in, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to our page, and talking about Idalia for most of the day tomorrow. So hope you all have a good rest of your evening, everyone, and look forward to seeing you back here bright and early for Idalia's landfall. Should be an interesting one. Have a good evening, everyone.